Thank you for that prelude. The opening words this morning are from an interfaith chaplain, Wayne Mueller, who has written a number of books, including one on creating Sabbath time for ourselves, whether we are religious or not. And this is what he writes in that particular book at the beginning. Because we do not rest, we lose our way. Poisoned by the hypnotic belief that good things come only through tireless effort, we never truly rest. And for want of rest, our lives are in danger.
Welcome. I'm Rick Holmgren. I am a longtime member of the church, and this year I'm board president. And I want to welcome you to our service this morning. During the service, you can enter in the chat window. You can enter your joys and concerns, and then I will summarize those for when we get to that part of the service. So if there are any joys or concerns you'd like us to hold together this morning, please write those in the chat room. We continue to offer our financial gifts to sustain the church and its work in the community. And so you can donate electronically at the church website, uumeadville.org, or you can mail checks directly. If this month's Share the Plate recipient is the Center for Family Services, and I know they can use the support. We also are continuing to collect non-perishable goods, foods for the Center for Family Services. So if you have contributions you want to bring to the church, please do so. And those will be brought to Center for Family Services. Also a reminder at 11:30 have our annual meeting. So I hope you will join us for that. And I think that's the announcements I have for today. Except for the pledge campaign. There's we are in the midst still of our pledge campaign. And if you have not yet mailed in your pledge to the church, please do so. If for some reason you didn't receive a pledge card and you would like to pledge this year, we'd appreciate that. You can contact Amelia Carr, and she will be happy to hear from you and help you through the process of making a pledge for 2021. So that we hear from everyone so we can plan for the coming year. And now Alex will light the chalice for us in the church sanctuary, and we'll reflect together on the words of the chalice lighting. We light this flame in the stillness, no wind of turmoil, no storm of change, simple stillness of breeze and work in our hearts and minds just for today. And we'll reflect again on our unison affirmation of covenant and mission. Our covenant is to be a loving, joyful community that nurtures spiritual growth, promotes compassion, social responsibility and service, and atmosphere of respect. Our mission is to be a faith community devoted to love and respect, reason and justice. And now we'll listen to the UU Choir from Atlanta singing Find a Stillness. You're welcome to sing along, but they're doing a version, which of course doesn't follow the usual pattern. So you may find that challenging. So you could also just enjoy listening to the music.
Thank you for that beautiful hymn. I want to explain the reading just for a moment. Some of you have probably read Alexis de Tocqueville, who was a French aristocrat and scholar who came to the United States in the early 1820s because a lot of Europeans had no idea what America was about. So he came and spent at least a couple of years in this country, meeting with people, presidents, laborers, and so on, and got an interesting flavor of what this country was like in 1827. And so I wanted to share this reading in the original translation from French to English, and I haven't changed the pronouns. So if you want to change the pronouns as I read this, as you hear it, please do. This is what he wrote. In the United States, a man builds a house in which to spend his old age, and he sells it before the roof is on. He embraces a profession and gives it up. He settles in a place which he soon afterwards leaves to carry his changeable longings elsewhere. And if at the end of a year of unremitting labor, he finds he has a few days vacation, his eager curiosity whirls him over the vast extent of the United States, and he will travel 1,500 miles in a few days to shake off any possible happiness. So I'd like you just to contemplate those words for a moment and ponder whether they're still true nearly 200 years later. The question or questions for the breakout rooms today will be, has the pandemic affected you in positive ways, slowing down, paying attention, etc.? And you'll hear more about this in the homily. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. I know that we have more people than usual for another reason, but it's great to see you all. And thank you, Rick, for taking on the job of being service leader today. And to Kirsten for your always excellent work, and to Amy as well, and all of you for being here. So for approximately 261 days this year, many of us have had to isolate or quarantine ourselves at home. And this has been something very new to us as a country, at least since 1918. And it assuredly has not been easy. In the words of an old Penn State friend of mine who tends to be a little bit on the conservative side, he said it was un-American to be stuck in our homes. I should add that he did and does wear a mask, even though very reluctantly. He told me he stayed at home anyway since March, even though he blamed, in no particular order, China, the government, liberals, and Obama for his cabin fever. We don't talk very much on Facebook. But I thought of him when I read the de Tocqueville passage last week. My friends, restlessness is part of our cultural DNA as a country. We've really not changed too much from our European immigrant ancestors. And I should add here that our fellow citizens, Black Americans, American Indians, and so on, have not had the option for 200 years to travel and wander as they would wish, given what happened to them. But our restlessness as a people is bottled up right now. People have lost jobs or had to work from home. Children's education has moved from being in schools much of the time to going to being at home and substituting for regular school, which means having better Wi-Fi, by the way, and better computers. That in turn meant challenging schedules for tasks, meals, and managing homework along with all of our usual tasks as people. And there was no real respite with vacations, no leisurely visits to family, few people taking flights, airports mostly deserted, long planned trips canceled or postponed. And few in this country, or really the world, were prepared for this pandemic year. It forced us to radically change our habits. So the questions that I'd like us to consider today, other than what you'll get in the breakout room, is this year an enlarged form of Sabbath time, of rest time for us? Or alternatively, can we find positives in this pandemic year of troubles and tragedy? Now let's return to Wayne Muller's opening words. Because we do not rest, we lose our way. Poisoned by the hypnotic belief that good things come only through tireless effort, we never truly rest. And for the want of rest, our lives are in danger. I should note that Muller wrote those words in the late 1990s. And at that time, he thought, we're very, very busy people. It's important to note, though, there were no smartphones, no widespread internet usage, and there were very few email providers other than CompuServe and AOL. Texting, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and even MySpace, which some of you may remember, didn't exist yet. It made our lives even more busy since then. And of course, what about all those who could not work from home since March? First responders, medical and support staff, construction workers, and many others. And we have to remember that they've had the opposite problem of not enough time at home to rest and renew. Many of them are exhausted and are going to need renewal time. And I wonder if maybe that may be part of our work in the coming year. For the rest of us, though, for right now, Muller suggested several ways to renew ourselves in such difficult conditions, although he certainly didn't plan for this one. Perhaps the ones I'll mention here will be useful. After all, we've been told that the next 2 months most likely will be the hardest time of this pandemic, with possible lockdowns, more isolation, and filled hospitals. Can we create our own Sabbath time of renewal during this next 2 months or beyond? So I'm going to mention 3. The first one, and these are all the ones that he suggested. The first one is the Sabbath of laying aside. The Sabbath of laying aside. Laying something aside is acknowledging that we need a time away from it. We find that whatever it is, it's consuming too much of our lives and time and energy. Sometimes it's a job, or maybe sitting in front of a computer screen for hours, AKA job. Now, for me personally, certainly one of the major ones is the allure of computers and the online universe. So here's an example, and it's from this summer in July when I was on my month vacation and I couldn't go anyplace. I was sitting in front of my computer monitor at home because I don't have a TV. And I started yelling at the screen, saying something like, "Those idiots, they're doing the same thing over and over and over again. They just don't get it." Now, maybe some of you have done the same type of words, or even better, as we watch and hear the news. However, in my case, I was yelling at other virtual players in an MMO, massively multiplayer online computer game called Fallout 76, by the way. And who was I complaining to out loud at the top of my lungs? My 2 cats. They just looked up and yawned and went back to sleep. At that point, I realized it was time to take a regular Sabbath break from my hobby, because if I was yelling at virtual players and my cats, life is too short. So I gave it up, at least one day a week. So one Sabbath offering of laying aside is to turn off our electronic equipment for a day. No news, no computer games, but hopefully lower blood pressure. Another annual task that I've had to put aside this year is travel. Every summer, I would move to a new church assignment somewhere around the United States, or I'd take a road trip across the country to see Deborah. Nothing this year except a quick trip to Maine and then a 14-day quarantine afterwards. It's been a little bit depressing to not be able to travel. I'll say also that many friends of mine in Seattle are very grateful that they can put aside the horrible commute into downtown Seattle or to Microsoft across Lee Lake. Working from home has become a new normal, and they are very grateful to have no longer having to drive in traffic for at least an hour to go 6 or 7 miles. What tasks or habits have you put aside to lighten your burden during this pandemic year? That brings me to the second form of Sabbath, the Sabbath of pleasures. Now, this might seem a conundrum with that first Sabbath practice of giving things up. Are we supposed to give up pleasure? Which would be a very American thing to do, by the way. This is what else Wayne Mueller says about Sabbath as a delight. And let's move our minds beyond the traditional idea of Sabbath as a religious ritual and ceremony, but to the larger world. He said, remember the Sabbath means remember that everything you have received is a blessing. Remember to delight in your life, in the fruits of your labor. Remember to stop and give thanks for the wonder of it. He says that is what Sabbath is all about. So this year, after getting off the computer, I found great pleasure in baking foods for myself, because I've never really baked foods in my life. We had a wood stove at the farm in Maine, and baking in it was a very tricky process, and I avoided it. I mostly did stovetop cooking, but this year, suddenly, I had more time. So, coconut custard pie, casseroles, stir fries, different types of soup. All these were new and mostly successful cooking adventures that I had not tried in my adult lifetime. Another pleasure was to walk Ernst Trail during the early daytime hours, say around 7 a.m. There weren't very many people around, especially in the spring. I didn't have to walk fast. I had all the time that I needed to take a pleasant, lengthy walk. I was also able to have the pleasure of my other hobby of amateur photography on those walks. Sometimes my wandering eyes and attention would catch a scene or an object that I thought, this would make a decent photo, which I could share with others. Some worked, others didn't. But it was being able to be attentive to things that I would see that had an artistic flair to them. And so that was a way of finding pleasure in the quiet. What pleasures have you found during this pandemic year you might otherwise have not experienced? Now, let's turn to a third form of Sabbath time. Wayne Mueller calls it the Sabbath of belonging. And it's about being together in community. And as you all know, Jewish and Christian and Islamic communities emphasize a religious component of Sabbath time. That's one reason we meet on Sunday. We could, since we're Unitarian Universalists, we could meet any day of the week and it would be okay. But Sunday is usually the day set aside for worship in North America. Jewish communities usually meet either on Friday night or Saturday. And for Muslims, Friday is the holiest day of the week. And so Sabbath in those traditions is a time of putting aside work, but also celebrating our lives with others in the community. I think this particular form of Sabbath time has been the hardest to give up. We can't meet together in person, even for a potluck or a class or Sunday services here in the sanctuary. And I know it's been really hard for me not to see you and others in person. For one thing, it makes me keep wondering about people's names. Like poor Rich a couple of weeks ago when I called him, I don't remember what I called him, but what was it? Was it Ross?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So please note, Rich, that I got your name right this time. But it's easier when we're in person because you have name tags on. The only time we've been able to get together in person this year, since March, was for the picnic. And even then, we had fewer people than usual. But I tell you, it was such a delight to see people face to face, even with masks on. So how can we renew a Sabbath of being together in community? Because we don't quite know when the pandemic is going to come to an end. Although it looks quite possible with the vaccines that by summertime, we will be more or less back to a new normal. Well, here's one idea I had and I shared with several of you. It's likely we're not going to be able to meet in person until early summer. That's my guess anyway. Usually at that time, we have informal services in the parish house during the summertime. And maybe we'll be able to start there, thinking small first. But let's suppose a scenario where we can get back together after the restrictions are gone. The authorities say it's safe to do so after more than a year. No more restrictions, no more need for social distancing, no more need for masks. Now, who knows if that's really going to take place? But I can fantasize for a moment. What I've suggested to several of you is that, as you know, we have an annual in-gathering service. And it's the Sunday after Labor Day. So this year, next year, it would be September 12th. What if we were to make in-gathering this next year really a homecoming Sunday? A very special service, not to just, okay, we're back after the summer, but here we are in this sanctuary for the first time in 18 months. Imagine that. We could, in a homecoming celebration that is also in-gathering, we could welcome each other with a potluck afterwards. We could celebrate the Sabbath of coming back into community and the gifts that we bring. And yes, if it is possible, if the new normal allows us, maybe we can hug. Maybe we can take masks off. Maybe we can see each other's smiles. Imagine what a celebration that would be after 18 months. So those are some of my hopes for us creating Sabbath time, even at the hardest of times. Things that we give up, things that we take pleasure in and renew, and ways we return to community. I'd like us to consider those along with a question with the breakout room, which I know we'll go to in a moment. Yes, yes, so I remember. Has the pandemic affected you in positive ways? Slowing down, paying attention, learning how to bake, baking bread, and so on and so on and so on. So those will be for the breakout rooms, and now I will turn it over to Kirsten to arrange us accordingly.
So for joys and concerns, we have a number of COVID-related concerns. I would express a community as a whole at this time. It's very challenging, but also within the church, we have Joyce and Jody who are recovering. Josh is recovering. Jennifer, hold them in our hearts. Concern for Dave and Jane Anderson. Jane's mother, Joan, passed away yesterday of COVID. So please keep them in your hearts. Concern for Mark's brother, who is so far well, but a avowed never masker. So let's hold him in light. There's a concern for Amelia's uncle Bill, who passed away this week. Concern for Earl Schreiber, who is a friend of Carol's and Falconer, a very generous person who is in his final days. There's also joy in this time, and so just the joy for the many hands that make these services possible, and all of the innovation and good thinking and good work that's gone into making that happen. And I'll add a joy for, we don't have a pandemic puppy, but we do have pandemic plants. And so I will add a joy for a beautiful hibiscus flower that has graced our life the last day or so. So those kinds of things continue to be in our lives. And so I appreciating those joys as well. So let's take a moment now for a short time of reflection on the joys and sorrows that are mentioned here, but then also all those things that we hold in our hearts that maybe are too dear to share at this time. Now let's reflect together on these words as Alex extinguishes the chalice. Love fiercely, be humble, speak softly, listen deeply. Another, practice Sabbath, love fiercely. Blessed be.